Hello to my earth signs Capricorn, Taurus and Virgo. Welcome to the Sagittarius full moon. You'll find the timestamps for your rising signs listed below. Hello Capricorn Rising, welcome to your reading for, well, welcome to Gemini season first up. But this is the reading for the Sagittarius full moon happening moments away on Thursday the 23rd of May at 5 minutes to midnight. So in this reading I'm going to give you some astrology that leads us up to this full moon and also sees us through up until June the 1st. So there's a bit of information in here. What we're kind of standing at the precipice of Capricorn Rising is the beginning of a story that has been like 12 years in the making. So the reason I say that, we'll get to Sagittarius in a moment, but first of all I wanted to speak about Gemini, what the sign means, where it shows up for you, and what's about to happen there. So Gemini on your birth chart is the sign that rules your 6th house, which has a lot to do with repetition. It has a lot to do with an active service. So think about your world. Maybe it could be your work. It could be, the way that I think about it is what your sort of day looks like and how you sort of stick to task and the things that you know that you have to do in order to keep a tight ship. That's a way to remember what the 6th house might mean. In the ancient times, it had a lot to do with servitude. So you can sort of see that sort of link about needing to keep a sort of clear head and spirit to go through with what you have to go through with, you know, the grind. Gemini is very conversational. It's about the mind. It's an air sign that speaks to our intellect. It speaks to lots of conversations too, lots of problem solving. And so when I look at these two in communication, Gemini and the 6th house, I can see that you're best when you're communicating either instruction or taking instruction and sort of working in a grander scope to problem solve and strategize. So maybe that's something that we can work with as far as this goes. I want to have you think about your life and think about that part of your world. Think about your work, your active service. June 2012 to July of 2013. Think about how life was for you in that period of time and think about what was being exaggerated, what was really being honed in on as far as what's working and what's not working, because it's about to happen again. The planet Jupiter, the best way to remember what it means is to look at it. It's the gas giant, the biggest, boldest sort of sphere in our solar system. Gas expands, it propels, doesn't it? It exaggerates. And that's what Jupiter in astrology does. In the Greek, Jupiter is Zeus. So think about the king of the gods. There's a lot of faith and hope that we can ascribe to Jupiter too. The last time that Jupiter was in Gemini was June 2012 to July 2013. And we're about to step into another Jupiter-Gemini moment. On the 26th of May, Jupiter will enter into Gemini and be there for a year. So there's going to be an emphasis, an examination, an exaggeration on what parts of your grind are working and what parts are not working. The thing about Jupiter in Gemini is they have something that feels like an uncomfortability. They kind of aren't working at their best potential because they'd much prefer to be in Sagittarius. Sagittarius and Pisces are the two signs that Jupiter is like the space holder, the ruler of. And so when Jupiter's in Sagittarius, amazing. We can be really optimistic and we can be really inquisitive. We can, you know, winging a prayer on a hope and a what's that phrase? You know what I mean. We can do anything with Jupiter in Sagittarius. Anything's possible with Jupiter in Pisces. Jupiter in Gemini is emphasizing the continual toing and froing, or the options, or the possibilities, or the anxiety. And this isn't to say that your work life, your grind, your service is going to be racked with anxiety for the next year, but it is going to be highlighting what is working and what is absolutely not working, Capricorn Rising. So hopefully that makes some sense to you, and maybe you can start to feel that a little bit in your ether as well. You can feel this like, okay, the wheels are on, they're not come off, they might come off. What needs to change in the way that I'm devoting my time, the way that I'm working myself into the ground? Now, do remember that you're a Capricorn rising, so work is what you love. That's fine. But let's just keep our eye on that. And maybe by recollecting and by thinking about your rhythms and routines and what you were devoted to June 2012 to July 2013, what came to you. Maybe it was a bit of a Björk, there's more to life than this kind of moment for you. That could have been something too. We can work with this. Put a pin in that. Let's continue. So Jupiter and Venus, let's talk about Jupiter. Let's continue. We'll continue that story. So the day of the full moon, Jupiter is going to be at the final degree of Taurus, just about to enter into Gemini. You can see Taurus, Gemini. They're about to come into Gemini. But before they leave Taurus, before they leave your house of your individual creativity, your self-expression, your artistry, your sexuality, your pleasure, Venus, the planet that does its best work in Taurus and in Libra, is going to meet up with Jupiter. So there's going to be an expansion and a magnifying glass on your access to pleasure, your access to creativity, what makes you feel good, what lights you up. And then Jupiter's going to enter into the daily grind. So I see this as some direct, very clear messaging for you, Capricorn Rising, that you can contend with this. We're happy to work. You're a Capricorn Rising, always happy to work. But it's going to have to include some pleasure. It's going to have to include some beauty, some artistry. You're going to have to, you need to feel creative in this work, is what I can kind of see here. Because soon enough, then Venus is going to enter into Gemini too. So Venus will be bringing with it that messaging that you've learned in your creative self into your daily grind, into that work ethic. So the day of the moon, all of this happens, and then at midnight, it's a full moon in Sagittarius. So we switch focus and we look to your 12th house, which is hidden, unconscious dreamland. The 12th is the house that was rising before you were born. The first house, Capricorn, was the house that was rising when you took your first breath. But when you were in utero, when you were in possibly the throes of being birthed, it was Sagittarius that was rising. And so that's your 12th house. This connects us to whatever you think it does, whether that be past lives, your unconscious, your dreams, other dimensions. I'll leave that up to you because it's very private, and that's what the 12th house emphasizes, is this is hidden, private work. You don't have to tell everyone about this stuff. It's incredibly cosmic and incredibly optimistic, because let's think about Sagittarius in that house for you. That's Jupiter's work. So perhaps in some way you can feel Jupiter in Gemini calling to Sagittarius for help from time to time. Maybe there's something in your grind that you're about to contend with. Perhaps you're looking down the barrel of like a load of work and you're like, right, how can I make this bearable? I need some of that magic. I need some of this mystery of the 12th house. So if I were you, Capricorn Rising, I would call upon this full moon. If you can be up that late, stand underneath it at midnight on the 23rd. However, the night after is going to be just as full as well. It'll be just as beautiful. So, and it will be a Sagittarius moon too. So the moon will still be in Sagittarius. So you've got time. I don't want to labor all of this with like exactitude. I find that really confronting. You might not. You might love that. I don't. Ask your dreams what the solutions for some of this tension or some of this overexertion in your work might look like. How can you sew these two parts of yourself together? Think about it. The sixth house is really reality-based, hard-nosed, hard line, facts. This is the real world. The 12th is everything but that. So if Jupiter is in your reality, what can Sagittarius, what can your dreams teach you? Where are you going? Perhaps there's parts of your Sagittarian self, Capricorn Rising, that you can really rely on during this time. Perhaps we can think about the definition of Sagittarius and what that sign brings to all of us, which is hope, which is faith, which is giving it a go, trying. I always think about candles when I think about Sagittarius too. I think about that beautiful, magical mystery, understood and set up on the altar to be able to create with. Aries, fire in Aries can be full on. Fire in Leo is so bright. Fire in Sagittarius it's a place to pray. So perhaps you might want to be praying at this full moon too, if that's something, and in whatever color or texture that praying looks like. This might be a beautiful moon to do so. I'm going to get you some tarot as I look at what else I might explore with you. I don't want to labor this with too much information, but I'm going to stop apologizing for myself. Pause it if you need to go over it. You understand. Okay, so on the 30th of May, Mars, our bravery, is going to meet up with Chiron, our pain. So I'm looking at your 4th house. I'm looking at your home base, your root structure. I'm looking at perhaps the story that got you from childhood to here, your relationship with your ancestors, and the home, the sanctity, the privacy, the space that you're creating for yourself. I'm thinking about what Chiron has been bringing up with it, and all of those eclipses urging us to look at some of these stories that we've been contending with. Now I'm looking at it with something that smells a bit more like bravery, because Mars is great in Aries. Mars is the sword and the shield, and we can speak up for ourselves with Mars in Aries. And so some of these pain points that we've been exploring this year, on the 30th, there might be some sort of moment that calls you to stand up for yourself. Or it might be a moment that calls you to be like, too bad, so sad. This is my life. This is how I run my house. This is my privacy, and it's very important to me. You're really being asked to drop in to the Sagittarian parts of you, and it might be you don't have to have planets in Sagittarius for you to align yourself with the sign. You must understand, Capricorn. Obviously, our planet placements point to emphasis on these parts of our lives, and we can find links for our strengths, but every sign has a part to play in our chart. And the 9 of Wands right here is a Sagittarian card, and it does speak to me of someone who is kind of maybe at their wit's end, or maybe is sort of standing in guard and protection of what they've been cultivating. They may kind of feel at times that they don't have much left. You can see that there's all these burnt out matches in this version of the card. But this beautiful figure right here is stoic and standing in absolute conviction that she is not moving, that she's standing watch, standing guard of what she's protecting, her magical qualities. The 9 of Cups speaks to the kind of recollection. You know, there's moments in life where you sort of think, well, you know, that phrase that I laugh at it. At the end of the day, that sentiment. It's sort of like, well, when all is said and done, this has been my life. These cups represent every emotional pitfall, triumph, lesson that I've come up against so far. And in this moment, I'm just reflecting, and I'm thinking to myself, I have done such a beautiful job. And I'm really glad for everything that I've been through, as difficult as some of it has been, as painful as a lot of it has been. I stand here and look at that 9 and 9. They're speaking to each other, aren't they? I stand here and I am brave and I am bold and I am able to continue as well. The nines come near the end of the cycle, as the mutable signs do as well. So there can be a bit of fatigue. But I think that Jupiter in Gemini is like, well, fatigue or not, we're about to step into this. What's the solution? How are we going to continue, Capricorn Rising? Temperance teaches us that we can do both of these things. That the power of fire, the power of our passion and our magic and our optimism is just as important as our sensitivity and our emotional selves and our feelings being listened to. And putting on a brave face is one thing, but there has to be room for vulnerability as well in this life. Capricorn Rising, and this is what Temperance teaches us. This is what Sagittarius teaches us. There is a melancholy to Sagittarius that not many people speak about. I see it so clearly and so beautifully. I see the relationship between Sagittarius, the Centaur, and Chiron in some ways too. That's always been something that's been so lovely for me to find the link to. You are so optimistic and brave and ready, Capricorn Rising, and you're as gentle and vulnerable and needing of affection and love and kindness as everybody else. So if you can use these three cards as a talisman for when in doubt, ask your dreams, look to the Sagittarian parts of you, delve into that 12th house, see what is communicating with you. A lot of folks are developing their language around spirit guides and around protectors, and you know, we're also uncomfortable sometimes to, especially the Capricorn parts of you, would feel so humiliated to be called on that, or you know, for the sincerity of your notion to be called out. Sort of, oh come on, like what are you talking about, hippie moron? As a card-carrying bona fide hippie, I want you to remember my funny little face whenever you feel self-conscious about your spirituality, about what you believe in. Because I believe you, Capricorn Rising, and it took me nearly my whole life to believe myself. But there's no going back. That's your reading, babe. I hope that was helpful. Yeah, you know, when an outer planet changes sign, we turn another page. And as I've been saying before, the next couple of years, we'll be turning a lot of pages. All of these outer planets are shifting sign. We've got a lot to contend with. But I'm glad that you're here, and I'm glad that this work helps in some way. If you are still here with me, Capricorn Rising, please put a golden heart in the comments. I'd really appreciate that. And if you'd like me to draw your birth chart, I shall do. They look like this. You can make your appointment at umaruby.com. Pick a spirit reading if I've not met you before. If I have met you before and you'd like to see me again, choose a magic, truth, love, growth, or femme reading. All of the details are on my website. If you'd like to support my work, you can head to buymeacoffee.com/umaruby. You can put some money in the tip jar, or you can subscribe to this channel for $10 Australian a month. It's been, yeah, I really appreciate the support on that. I will be with you, and we'll speak about a seed of potential, some growth that we can look forward to back in Gemini. It'll be a Gemini new moon, and Jupiter will be present. So let's read the back of the seed packet. Let's water it when it needs it. Let's fertilize when it needs it. And let's sit back and look at how your 6th house may evolve from here. Think about the 2012, 2013. Think about what you contended with as far as your energy exertion, and what you won't put up with anymore. And let's use that, and let's look at your life now. That's it. I love you. Bye. Hello, Taurus Rising. Welcome to Gemini season. And this is your reading for the Sagittarius full moon, which is happening incredibly soon on Thursday, the 23rd of May at 5 minutes to midnight, if you're in the Southern Hemisphere with me. So let's do it. Let's go out there at the witching hour and stare at the full moon and release. This is a very personal, powerful one for you, Taurus rising, and I'll get to why in a moment. However, I'm going to be speaking about the astrology that leads up to this moment. So it's all happening in the one day. And then for the rest of the month until the 1st of June or so, there's lots of things that are happening that have specific relationship to your birth chart and your first house. So I want to make sure that I'm clear. Let's look at the opposite side of Sagittarius. Let's look at Gemini. So this is where the sun is. At 2 degrees of Gemini is the sun. 2 degrees of Sagittarius is the moon. A few days after the full moon in Sagittarius, 3 days after, the planet Jupiter is going to be leaving your sign and entering into Gemini. Now, you've been reaping the benefits of Jupiter in Taurus for the past year. So if you can think back to, I can't remember what month it was last year, around this time, Jupiter entered Taurus. And so there was this sort of magnification or this growing emphasis or hope or optimism about your selfhood, about your individual speck of stardust, your light that rises, who you are as an individual. And through this time, Jupiter has been making all of these different relationships and configurations, one with Uranus, one with the rebel within you, the one that can't be silenced any longer, full support, Jupiter 2. Now, Venus is also in your first house, and right before this full moon, Venus and Jupiter will form a conjunction, which means that they're coming together and their powers combined are expressing themselves in your first house. So I wish for you, first off the bat, Taurus rising, to remember what Venus signifies, which is love and passion and beauty. All of the things that make your Taurian soul sing, your aesthetic leanings, your relationship with pleasure, your relationship with beauty are all being emphasized moments, hours before this full moon in Sagittarius, which we'll get to, put a pin in it. Jupiter then will move into Gemini. So on the 26th, 3 days after this full moon, Jupiter will leave you and will enter into Gemini. And Gemini is the sign that we speak to your individual worth, your finances, the way you resource yourself, and what you do with those resources. What are your values, Taurus rising? What are you putting all of this money towards? Jupiter in Gemini plays at a different rhythm than it might do in Taurus. So you know how each of the signs have a planet that sort of guides their way? Jupiter is much more comfortable in Sagittarius or in Pisces. Things like hope, optimism, growth, potential, anything's possible. You can see that in the Sagittarian sides of you and the Piscean sides of you. Jupiter in Gemini is in the opposite sign to where it's most at home. And so when there's an exaggeration on Gemini, communication styles, conversation, tete-a-teting, toing and froing, talking, it can become pretty confusing. I'd like you to think back to June 2012, if you're able to, and July into July of 2013. So June 2012 to July 2013, this period of time was the last time that Jupiter was in Gemini. And so when you think about your resources, what you put forward in this life, your talents, you know, it's over a decade now. So there's been obviously some development in that part of your life. Think about the quality of time of 2012 and 2013. Think about what was being emphasized, the light and the shadow. Were there things around exponential growth and possibly greed? When I think about Jupiter in Gemini, I think about, when I think about Jupiter in its shadow aspect, I think about growth at all costs. I think about wealth, I think about expansion, and I think about greed. When I think about Jupiter in its shadow, I think about the direct link that we can see in our lived lives about the pillaging from the Earth's natural resources and the structures in society that exist that have the wealthy continue to shine, and the difficulty, the in fact near impossibility that it is for people to actually step out of poverty, no matter how talented or how valuable their contribution is. It's quite literally almost impossible to step out of the working class. There's a fallacy that the curtain has fallen down on all around us, you know, about the American dream, about, you know, you just find your skill, work really hard, talent, and you'll thrive. In the current system that permeates our culture, that's impossible. That might be your experience, and there might be certain chains that you feel around your ankle that perhaps in 2012, 2013, you were committed to shaking off, but maybe there were some clues in there back then as to the limitations of your identity holding you in place, because certain people stay there. Perhaps there's something about your privilege that you can't ignore, and in 2012 and 2013 there was a moment, or continued moments, where you were like, wow, I'm really expanding, I'm really growing here, like the money's flowing through. That wouldn't have happened without all of this massive support behind me, and I'm feeling some sort of guilt around that. I'm here to tell you, Taurus Rising, no matter what side of the scale that you sit on, and I'm speaking in polarity because of Gemini, no shade. You know, I don't begrudge anyone for success. What I'm really emphasizing here is Jupiter's obvious expansion on the conversation about growth at all costs and about the privileged few. Because as a culture, we recognize, and no one thinks that they're rich, which is another funny thing as well, especially millionaires. You're not rich if you're a millionaire these days. It's maddening. That's something else we can talk about another time. What Jupiter is going to reveal or expand upon, magnify, is these conversations around wealth for you. That's what I see here on your birth chart, Taurus Rising, with this being so directly squared at your second house. So with that, though, there is going to be some more sweetness that comes through. Venus is going to come through Gemini. Jupiter in Gemini is uncomfortable and as exaggerated and as sort of like mouthy as they might be in that sign. There is going to be some, you know, you can't get through it unless you go through it, you know. So it's okay. Maybe there's parts of your life that this reading is having you recall back in the middle of 2012, June 2012 to July of 2013. Think about what was occurring for you in your resources. How were you resourced? What did you come up against? I don't say any of this to quell your enthusiasm to, like, I believe in you, Taurus Rising. You can do whatever you want. You can thrive. I've got such faith in you, and so does Jupiter. It's just moments like this, Gemini is calling us to have these sobering conversations, that it's sometimes not enough to hold that belief. And right now the culture is demanding of us that we stop telling that fallacy to people that are vulnerable, because it builds and it builds and it builds to a place where a continual feeling of failure permeates their personalities, and it steps in their way of finding their strengths, finding their growth. I know and I believe in my spiritual heart that we can break these cycles. I completely believe that the shackles that bind us and bound our ancestors, it can be up to us to break that cycle. That's one foot in the spirituality of it. The other foot in the reality of it, Taurus Rising, is that other people have had such a leg up that it's nearly impossible for them to fail. And that's just something that you need to be mindful of. Not everything can be judged on talent and talent alone. In fact, it can't be, it shouldn't be. And this is something that is starting here and it's spreading across the globe. Because any English-speaking Western civilization has a leg up on half of the planet too. Do you see? It can't stop. These conversations are happening, so we've got to work with them. When it comes to your privilege, name it and work with it, because your second house is your money, your coin, your resources, and also your values. What do you intend to do with this fortune? Or what do you intend to do with this misfortune? I don't know. I don't think the opposite of fortune is misfortune when it comes to this stuff. Let's really be honest with each other, Taurus Rising. Especially in the arts. Okay, now, sorry, excuse me, this is a rant, tralala. There's so much lip service and there's so much platitudes, and in retrospect, there's always retrospective exhibitions of the, activists or the working class. There's this hideous faction of art. It's been a long time since I was actively involved in the art world. Outsider art, I find to be so insulting. It's sort of like, oh, you're so unaware of your genius. Like folk. Do you understand? I'm going somewhere. I'm going to reroute, course correct. But all of these topics are coming and they're growing, and we have to speak about it. Something that I think Jupiter in Gemini is really going to emphasize is how much the access we have to communicating with each other and the platforms that we use, that we've become so addicted to as if we were all gambling addicts. This is going to be contended with too over the next 12 months. These topics, these themes are going to be emphasized. How much worth do we place on ourselves because of our social media friend count, like count, dopamine hit, whatever it is? How much do we know about a subject before we start mouthing off about it? How many arguments do we want to get into over the internet to feel righteous with no physical real life repercussions? All of this stuff is being emphasized right now with Jupiter, expansion, uncomfortable, in Gemini, communication. So let's batten down the hatches and let's sort of go with it. Hopefully Venus and Jupiter will bring some love and bring some creativity, some warmth, some sweetness, some pleasure from your first house that you can then inform your second house with this. Get back to the garden, Taurus Rising. Get back to what you're in it for in the first place. Is it prestige and wealth and money and power and fame and exclusivity? Because if it is, bye bitch. Like, have fun with that, because at the end of the day, you're going to be left alone. You're going to be sitting there with all of your fame and prestige and connections and networking in the far off past. You're a Taurus rising, so love at all costs. Love is your guiding principle. The goddess of beauty and love and pleasure ain't interested in labels, so why are you? That's that part of the reading, girl. Sorry, we're going there. It's Gemini season. Let's look at the moon. So in opposition to all of this stuff, we have this bright, bold Sagittarius full moon. It's lighting up your 8th house, your house of grief and of loss. So let's talk it down. Let's get connected again, Taurus rising. This moon is going to bring up some beautiful, much needed emotions for you. I really see it coming in a beautiful synchronicity that you're going to get back in touch with your feeling. I just got goosebumps all over myself as we talk about this full moon. This is the point. This is the legacy. This is where your values lay. It's the connections that you make in this life. It's the commitment and the devotion to other souls that walk this earth, some that no longer walk this earth. That commitment, that conviction, that oath is what this full moon is lighting up. Immaterial, possessions or otherwise, blah, blah, blah. This moon is like, this is what it's for. So enjoy it, my love. Feel it. Because we're all having difficulty feeling it. And that's okay. It's not our fault. We're being manipulated by Tats Lotto, disguised as social media. It's coming to a head People are up in arms about banning this platform, that platform, and we've got to really keep our governing systems in check as to why they're banning it. Is it for our well-being? You know, I understand that complexity, but this is what Gemini and the emphasis on Gemini has to have us come into contention, come in face to face with, is the complexity of the issue. If you're going to us and them it, and you're going to rally against and demonize, I've got little time or little energy to work with that any longer. It's actually killing me. I've got a Gemini moon, and that split hurts. I can't do it any longer. So check yourself, check your values, feel your grief, Taurus rising. I'm going to get you one tarot card because I've spoken over time. It's that one. What's that one? It's the Ten of Cups. At the end of everything, babe, when all is said and done, it will be the love that you remember, that you shared in this life. It won't be how high you've climbed, or who you were the mastermind over, or who you manipulated, or who you fought against manipulation, or how righteous you were. It'll be how much you loved, and how much tenderness and sweetness and kindness and affection you allowed into your life, and how much you gave away of that tenderness, sweetness, kindness and affection. I understand the pain, sincerely. I really do. And I understand the retaliation when you're being put upon or accused, or when you're feeling that this culture is like, call it out, cut it off at the knees, cancel. You won't remember any of that. You'll remember the love. You'll remember your family. You'll remember the ones that you hold dear. And then it's gone. And then we start again. And whatever you didn't deal with in this life, you carry into the next one. So deal with it now, Taurus rising. I love you. I'm not meaning any of this with anything else but sincere, heartfelt love. I'm going to be with you in 2 weeks to speak about the Gemini new moon. We're going to sow a seed in Gemini. So whatever it is that you're hoping to grow or hoping to have occur in your second house of your money, your resources, your talents, your values, we can do that with Jupiter's company, can't we? So we'll emphasize what we're not interested in and what we're actually growing this thing for. If you're still here with me, Taurus rising, and you'd like me to read your birth chart, I can draw you one. They look like this. And you can make your appointment at umaruby.com. If you'd like to support my work, you can subscribe for 10 Australian dollars a month. You can also put some money in the tip jar if you have the capacity. Thank you very much. Put a love heart in the comments, whatever color you want. Love is the answer. Love is the reason. Love is the purpose. Never forget that. I love you. Hello Virgo Rising, welcome to Gemini season, and this is your reading for the Sagittarius full moon happening very, very soon on Thursday the 23rd of May at 5 minutes to midnight. So if you're in the Southern Hemisphere with me, stay up late, stand underneath that great big bright full moon and let it all go, let it out. For you Virgo Rising, Sagittarius is the sign that rules the 4th house. So it's our home, our roots, our privacy, our ancestry. And so I want you to, as much as you're able to, enjoy what you're cultivating for yourself, the private chambers of your world, spaces where you feel nurtured and protected, and the family that you're building for yourself. This is the spotlight. This is the moment for you to be thankful for what you've got. This is the moment for you to hold the people that you're closest with and be grateful for their love, for their affection, for their nurturing qualities, and for the nurturing that you provide them too. It's a private one, this one, Virgo Rising, and it's coming right on the precipice of a change. I know I've been saying this a lot, but if you recall my other horoscopes, the next few years, we see all of the outer planets, the ones that are furthest away, move signs. They're the planets that take longest to shift. And so when they do, it feels like the beginning of something else. I want to put a pin in Sagittarius for the moment because I do want to speak a lot about Gemini. Gemini is dual. It's conflicted. It's investigative, conversational, expressive. Gemini is the sign that rules your 10th house, your most public-facing visible self, where your career, your legacy, your public perception may sit. And as it stands, a few days after this full moon in Sagittarius, on the 26th of May, the planet Jupiter is going to shift signs from Taurus into Gemini. And the last time that Jupiter was in Gemini was from June of 2012 to July of 2013. So I'd like for you to think about that period of your life as it relates to your career, your public-facing self. Jupiter brings growth. Jupiter is the planet that is made of gas, that is big and full of storms, and does everything that you might think a gaseous planet does in astrology. It magnifies, expands, grows, ignites, propels. Unfortunately, Jupiter has a tricky time in Gemini because it would much prefer to be in Sagittarius or in Pisces. They're the two signs that Jupiter does its best work. In Sagittarius, we are hopeful and optimistic and unafraid and will give it a try. In Pisces, anything is possible. And so you can see that encouragement is really helpful in those two signs. Sagittarius is in opposition to Gemini. And so whenever a planet is in the opposite sign of which it is really good at, it can start to act out, or it can't find its best power. It can't be as beneficial as Jupiter might usually be. This isn't to say that it's all going to be terrible, but there is an instability. And so maybe you can think about times from June 2012 to July of 2013 where there was this sort of roller coaster of like growth in your career. You were like, wow, all of these opportunities are coming my way and I see that this is the path that I might like to take. This is the thing that I want to do. And with that sort of growth, that expansion, there was also a lot of shadow work that sort of arrived too. There was a lot of missteps or perhaps a lot of choices that you made that you maybe in hindsight would prefer not to. I'm kind of working with this Jupiter in Gemini because 2012 to 2013 was a pivotal point in my life. Those months in particular were pivotal. I went through hell and back. And when I got back, the Jupiter Gemini of it all showed me why. It was like, this is actually what you should focus on rather than this. And so I did. And things felt much smoother and much more hopeful than they had in the earlier parts of Jupiter in Gemini. That's kind of what everyone's experiencing. And so if we go back to the idea that Gemini does represent a lot of conversation and a lot of communication as well, you know, we speak in Gemini, speaking to each other, the twins, all the time. What I'm looking at is June 2012, my smartphone was firmly in my fist. And this is when things started to ping off for me. You know, there was an ability to maintain relationships that were far-flung across the planet. There was opportunity for me to expand upon my own work. Back in those days, I was a performer and a stripper and a dancer. And so opportunity arose and there was things that were sort of growing because of my connectivity to the world around me. We were all learning as best we could in the wild, wild west of the internet how to use these tools. Cut to now, 12 years later, and we can see the repercussions of this amount of connectivity, this amount of access to each other, and how it's coloured our perception and our opinions of each other on the basis of this artifice of the social media mask. Do you see what I mean? We've got so much information at our fingertips, and the way that the platforms are designed now is like the pokies. It's like Tats Lotto. It's like addictive. You just scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll and absorb and absorb and absorb, or not. but it's on the basis of what the machine thinks you want to know. And it's indiscriminate of ethics and of logic. It's just that the logic is more of this, and that will keep us connected, keep us looking into these things. I completely understand the paradox of me coming to this realization through a screen to you. But if we're going to use this level of communication and these tools of connectivity for better use than they are now, we've got to name the pitfalls. And I think that Jupiter expanding, extrapolating on the topics of communication and connectivity is going to show us even more of the pitfalls of these things. We're so unwilling to trust at the moment. And Jupiter wants us to trust. Jupiter is faith. Jupiter's going to show us why we can't trust what we're looking at. The culture is teaching us that too, with all of the paranoia around artificial intelligence and deep fake technology. You know, it's all coming to a head, and it's all going to show us where we went wrong. So let's ride that wave. And let's also personally on your birth chart, look at your front-facing, public-facing, career-focused self, because there might be some things that occur for you over the next year that you're going to need to contend with and figure out if this is the right path forward for you or not, as I did back in the old days. So that's the Jupiter in Gemini feeling. In the lead up to this full moon in Sagittarius, so switch it around, not from public facing, back to your private world. The moon is going to be, as I said, a great spotlight, a great invitation for you to be emotionally honest with those in your home, in your family, and hold them dear. It's in support. It's a nice moon. Like there's nothing too hectic going on here as far as the other astrology is concerned. In the lead up to this full moon, so during the day on the 23rd, Jupiter will still be in Taurus, and it will be met up with Venus as well. So Jupiter expanding, magnifying the beauty and the artistry of life. For you, Taurus is your 9th house, and this is the long conversation we've had around topics of religious trauma and spiritual devotion and mind expansion. You know, like there's been a revolution that's been occurring slowly but surely here for you about how you relate to your spirituality, how you relate to these kinds of languages. And Venus is great in Taurus. Venus does bring with it some real artistry and some pleasure. So hopefully we can come back to the garden, as it were, for a moment before this full moon, appreciate what we believe, what is keeping us faithful, what is keeping our hope alive, and then have that in some way inform our legacy, our career, our public-facing self. I really am intent on focusing on the Venusian principles of the astrology as we move forward, because I think we really need it. There's so much aggression and Mars happening that we need that other side of the coin. Gemini is great at sort of holding both in tandem, you know. The twins are sort of same and different, communicating, chatting to each other all the time. Sometimes one can turn, and it can be a bit of an attack. So we'll keep that in mind too as we are communicating our thoughts and opinions to other people. In the tarot, it's the 8 of Wands that this moon will be lighting up. So the sun's at 2 degrees of Gemini, the moon is at 2 degrees of Sagittarius, and the 8 of Wands is the card that lights up at that point in the zodiac. And the wands are magical emblems, aren't they? You can make something out of nothing with a wand, you can conjure with a wand. And this card shows direct magical precision. So when you're thinking about your private world, perhaps it's thinking about the way that you were raised. There might be some emotions that occur for you at this time. You might think about where you came from, and topics in your life might be showing up about the ancestral lines and what got you from there to this point. I'd really encourage you to sort of magnify what you're creating for yourself. If it's in opposition to what you were given, it might be an ongoing story, but there might be some cycles here that you're willing or wanting to break that might be emphasized as well. Old dynamics, you know, sometimes the internal workings of our world can echo so perfectly the external world. That sort of microcosm to macrocosm can be quite literal sometimes. I found that in my body, in my physical body, when that's in conflict, if that's anxiety sort of giving me aches and pains, or if I'm stuck here, or if I'm in battle with myself. I have a Gemini moon, so it's that sort of duality is very related to my body itself. My body needs to talk, to communicate, to question, and it's polarized. I think in some ways my sort of like, my gender journey has a lot to do with my Gemini moon. That's sort of that, you know, obvious two sides. I like to think about the best ways that I can incorporate both of them. And that's kind of where my gender sits at the moment. That's the language that I use. Also, that's another topic that we can speak about as well, about the oppression or dissent against that kind of evolution of language. You know, so Jupiter in Gemini will expand upon the conflict in the evolution of language. That's a nice little thing to think about. You don't have to agree with me. It's none of your... I don't give a shit what you think I am. I know what I am. Let's get you some tarot, I think, as I look at the other astrology. No, not this one. I think this one. Sorry. Yeah, so speaking of bravery, speaking of aggression, Mars is going to make an exact conjunction with Chiron on the 30th of May. So all of that work that we've been compelled to do with the eclipses, with your 8th house, with your house of grief and your house of obligation, where your energy is invested in that of the other, the pain points that might arise from that, from those contracts that you have signed or that you didn't sign, or the complex feelings that we have about sharing our life with somebody else, the pain that we feel when we have to say goodbye. You know, you can feel that Chiron's there for a purpose for you, Virgo rising. Mars brings bravery in Aries. Mars brings a sort of forthright personality. Mars is awesome at figuring out Aries stuff. So maybe there's some bravery that you're able to muster, able to face some of these pressure points that we've been speaking about for months now. That's just another part of the astrology leading into next month. The last little thing is that Mercury, your guiding light, the planet of messaging, you know, we're going to translate messages from the stratosphere. How do we put them forward? How do we say what we know? That's Mercury. How do we figure it out? Mercury will be exactly conjunct with Uranus in Taurus on the 31st, so that it's your 9th house of your spiritual leanings. I think that there's a lot of emphasis here on that part of your world, Virgo rising, about how you relate to your spirit, which might be different to the way that you used to. You might be finding better language for that metamorphosis at this conjunction with Mercury and Uranus on the 31st. But you tell me. It's not up to me to tell, it's up to you to tell or not. So yeah, I'm riddled with anxiety in the center. I can feel that. That's so welcome here, Virgo rising. I can really feel the conflicting thoughts, and I can feel the barrier that your mind is maybe creating for you, or the compulsion that you might feel to run away and to hide and to protect. I do feel a defenselessness right here in the center, and it's come from a place where you felt really passionate about what you were speaking about. It came from a place where you were speaking out in wisdom as far as you could glean. But them's fighting words have scared you at this point. Moving from here, and hopefully, even if it's just for this full moon, set it down. Hand over your control. I read the most beautiful writing. There's a Substack called Soft Gaze that I've been subscribed to by this lovely guy called Braden Alexander, and he writes this story about going to get a tarot reading in Mexico, and we're speaking about a lot of similar topics actually that we've been discussing in this reading. This kind of clenched feeling, this feeling of sort of worry that the entrapment of the mind will be forever, that there's no moving around this thought form or this way of thinking, this way of being. And the tarot reader gave some really beautiful advice, because the quandary was, I'm just so disembodied, I've got to get back into my body, I can't get back into my body, I'm stuck in the mind. The tarot reader said, forget the body, just let it go. It's not going anywhere, but right now you're not there, so forget it. Be disembodied for a moment. What are you without a body? You're a spirit. So what is the spirit saying? What is the spirit thinking? Separate from the brain's part of the body. It's just a lump of tissue. And it was really powerful advice that I read, and it shook me because, and Braden says so in the text too, we're taught, we've got to get back in the body, reinvigorate the relationship with the body. Certain times of crisis, as the Eight of Swords speaks to, where it's sort of like, yeah, we'll drop the chop, fine, that's a fact. You can re-enter the body when you're ready, but right now, what are you without it? Where will you go? I think that's effing stunning. Easier said than done, but sometimes with Gemini, we get trapped. I mean, that Eight of Swords card is a Gemini card. It's where the sun is actually at this time. And that advice I'd never heard before, because there's so many techniques to sort of reacquaint yourself with the physical self, and all of that is absolutely valid and true. This was really, really stark and frank advice that I'd never heard before, and I think that it's going to help me in those moments too. So fair enough, that's the way it is. What am I without a body? That's your reading, Virgo Rising. I love you lots. If you're still here with me, put a love heart in the comments, please. I don't mind what colour, whatever you like. I've been saying yellow, but the colour will come to you. Maybe you can tell me why. If you'd like me to draw your birth chart, they look like this, and we can make an appointment via Zoom on my website, umaruby.com. Book yourself a spirit reading if you've never met me before. If I have met you before and you'd like to have another reading, book a magic, truth, love, growth, or femme reading. There's a bunch of different journeys we can take with the essence of those questions and the astrology above and the tarot that we pull together. So have a think about it. I'll be with you soon with a seed. So the new moon in Gemini will plant in your 10th house, your career, your public-facing self. But probably we'll be doing that with a bit of influence from Jupiter, with a bit of this foresight and this recollection of what was occurring for you in June 2012 to July 2013, and how you'd like to extrapolate on that, extend upon that, or not make those same mistakes. Much love. I love you heaps.